amazing and great and fulfilled and joyous, but I have to move through certain values that mean the most to me. And having a coach with you do that is like, I mean, I think it's the most invaluable thing possible. Hello, my friend, and welcome to Something for Everybody. My name is Machbitz. Xenia, welcome to the show.
Hi, Aaron. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. My first and most important question is, how are you doing? Like, actually, for real, how are you doing?
Good question. I am a little bit nervous. I'm always a bit nervous when I'm doing the recording, so I did a bit of a grounding exercise, but it's just anxiety is going to settle in the next minute, I'm sure. But yeah, otherwise I'm okay. It's just allergy season, so if I'm starting to sneeze uncontrollably, I'm really sorry. It's going to pass. But yeah, I hope it's going to be fine.
Yeah, I mean, so far so good, right?
Yeah, so far so good, exactly. How are you doing?
Great. Never had it so good, actually. Yeah. It's amazing. I feel lucky. I feel very blessed. So yeah, incredible. I'm getting married soon, which I seem to be talking about in every episode that I've been recording recently. So maybe I'm excited about it. Maybe not. We'll see.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's awesome. But back to what you mentioned about nerves. Outside of your, breath work or grounding techniques, how do you think about being nervous? Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it helps you? Do you think it's a bad thing?
I kind of know biologically why we feel nervous, right? So it's something that is important to us, something we are excited about in a way, something that's that kind of matters. So our nerves are up because they want us to be super focused and ready for it. So I kind of get that, and like remembering why I feel like this always helps. But on the other hand, it's also something that does bother me because I'm kind of I wouldn't say anxious person, but I do have a lot of nerves, definitely. So when I kind of just know that it's something that I have to make sure it doesn't take over. So grounding exercises or like breath work or something is really important to me, and that really helps with these things because I also know it has a really strong impact on my health. And that's why I need to make it a priority to not let my nerves take over and kind of, really, really impact my health.
Mm. Has that always been a part of your life? Have you always been a little bit anxious, a little nervous, or is that something that's developed later? Or what's going on there?
That's a really good question. I think I've always been a bit more nervous or anxious than other people. I have no idea why that is. I do feel like I'm also more, like highly sensitive or just a bit more concerned about things than other people. So I definitely think it has been part of my life for a long time, but it has also gotten worse over the years because I've been in a lot of very stressful situations. I had an extremely stressful job that has definitely caused some trauma or something. And whenever this trauma is triggered, I definitely know that it is impacting me, it's impacting my health. And then I also feel like these anxiety situations are a lot stronger than they technically would have to be. So it's something that I'm very aware of. It's not that one situation that is stressful for me, but like my body remembers there has been stressful situations in the past, and that kind of always comes back, which I think is why my nerves are a bit more sensitive than other people. It's just an accumulation of things that happened in the past.
Mm. Yeah, I actually find that quite a bit with sort of coaches just in general, like yourself, right? Because I mean, you can't actually be a quality coach if you don't care about other people. So you're sort of always gonna feel this like, I don't know, like tension. I'm like, am I doing the right thing? Am I saying the right thing? Am I helping the right people? But that could always be to a point where it becomes debilitating and you just like don't do anything at all. But there's like maybe like this middle threshold where it's like you're still going out and doing the thing, but you're also like constantly thinking about it. And I mean, maybe there's a place where we can get to it where we're not doing that, but like I also find it can be like sort of helpful because I mean, I coach baseball, and so I'm wondering a lot of the times if like my message is getting through, or if the kids are understanding what I'm saying, or if they like what's happening, or if they're having a good time. Like, and not where it like destroys me, where I can't focus on them, or where I can't like actually do good coaching, but like trying to make things the best that it can be. And I feel like there's a balance there. Like obviously, like I said, some people like it would just ruin the whole experience for everyone because they can't get out of their own head. They're always in their own way. But like a little bit of that, it's not bad. I mean, maybe there's a place where we can eliminate that and only think about it after the coaching session potentially, where like we're thinking about it in a like reflective way, like, okay, this is what happened. I spent an hour with this person. This was good. This went well. Maybe this can be improved. But while I'm doing the thing, I can be in the present moment. Maybe that's also something that could be beneficial too. But I think about it like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think to a degree, it's good that we feel like that because we are impacted, like we are in a situation where we are directly impacting other people. So if, you're coaching baseball, I'm coaching people with regards to health matters. We should also be concerned about that, I feel. And it's probably good that we are taking it serious to a degree that it does sometimes get on our nerves a bit and impacts our nerves. But it's a big responsibility also, impacting other people's lives. And I also have to say, I wasn't always a coach. I never knew I would end up here. And I feel like my life has changed in that way, or I have become a coach because I know that I am a person who, has these strong feelings, these strong, sometimes anxious feelings. I know that other people struggle with that a lot. And I know what helped me deal with those. And it's something that I think helps me be a better coach because I understand people who feel similarly. And I know how I can help them, how I can help them develop different tools or different strategies to deal with that and not have that impact their life to a degree that is actually harmful for them.
Yeah, I feel like you're in the second half of your life. Um, maybe the part you were supposed to be in the whole time. I don't know. We'll see.
Maybe,
But
yes.
yeah, it seems like you're doing what you're meant to be doing, regardless of sort of the struggles and challenges that you had to overcome, which we'll definitely talk about. But before we do, I just want to get clear on a definition of what an autoimmune disease actually is, and then we can carry on from there.
Yeah, of course. So an autoimmune disease is basically when your immune system, that is, its job is to protect you, right? Protect you against any kind of foreign invaders or foreign microorganisms. Could be bacteria, it could be pesticides, it could be environmental toxins, anything really that could attack your body. Your immune system will protect you from that. And it's possible that the immune system becomes dysfunctional, dysregulated for many different reasons, of which we don't understand all of them. So it's a highly, it's a field of research that is still not fully researched. There's so many open questions and we don't know why things happen. But basically what can happen is that this immune system suddenly starts attacking our own cells. It suddenly stops to be able to differentiate what our own cells are, what invading cells are, and then it's possible that it starts attacking our different organs, different tissues, and that is something that the immune system can't forget to do. So once we have an autoimmune disease, it will likely always be with us. And the chance that we would then start developing a second or a third autoimmune disease are much higher than for people who don't have one in the beginning, because our immune system lost this capacity to differentiate what is ourself, what is our own cell, and what is an invading cell, in a nutshell.
Yes, very interesting. And what was your life like before you were diagnosed with your autoimmune diseases?
I always thought I was leading a very healthy life. Looking back, I probably also made some mistakes here to think that some things I thought were healthy turned out not to be so healthy, but I always thought I was leading a very healthy life. I definitely underestimated the impact of stress stress in my life on my
Mm.
health. So that was probably the biggest issue that I had, because I was kind of chasing a very high stress career. I was on track really to get where I wanted to. I had a job that I always had been working really hard to get to. So I thought everything was going really well, very much according to plan. So that was like mid 20s, I would say, is when it suddenly started to feel like maybe what I'm doing isn't what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. And the first kind of questions came up, and I felt like I'm working so hard, I don't really understand for what. And my health started to decline at the same time. And I was starting to put together the pieces of how that stress, how that work could really have an impact on my life. And then a couple of years later, I ended up here, lost that, or actually quit. I decided to change careers because that didn't feel so fulfilling to me anymore. I think also because I had by then put together the pieces, how that really does impact me, couldn't really justify why I was going to do that to myself any longer, and decided to take what I learned from my own struggle with autoimmune diseases, and put that into a program for other people with autoimmune diseases, so they can also learn from that. And most importantly, don't have to go through that on their own, because that is definitely the hardest thing that I did that I didn't have to do at the time.
Yeah. You said it was all part of the plan. Whose plan was it? Was it your plan to go into this high achieving career, or was it a societal plan, or parents, or combination of all the three?
Really, really good question. I definitely would say it was my plan at the time. It wasn't necessarily my parents' plan. I think they wanted me to. They were always very supportive of whatever I did, to be fair. But I think there was a lot of pressure from maybe society, but also my peers at the time, to get into a field of work that was kind of stressful, kind of high pressure, but also opened the door to, a lot of money, a lot of like career opportunities, and kind of the prestige you would look for in the first job out of university, because I went to university for a really long time and kind of had to pay off. Yeah, I don't know how much of it was really my dream to begin with, but it definitely turned into my dream because I was probably under a lot of influence from peers and society, I would say.
Yeah, I mean that's natural, but this idea of, you know, majority of people feeling sick and tired all the time, uh, like it's actually not normal to feel sick and tired, but our society and people around us are so accustomed to feeling that way that if we are feeling that way, we're just like, oh, this is just part of the deal. Like sometimes my stomach hurts, or sometimes
Mm.
I throw up for 3 or 4 hours, after I'm done eating, or I get really tired at 4 p.m. and want to just stay in bed, or whatever the case. Sometimes there is other extenuating circumstances, like maybe you need to go to the doctor because something's actually going on. But there's also a part where it's just like, this is how everyone else feels, so this is how I'm going to feel. The food I eat, the sleep I don't get, the movement I never have, the conversations with people, the relationships I'm not nourishing. And there's a quote that always pops up that I seem to mention almost every single episode of this podcast, but it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And just because everyone else is doing it doesn't mean that you should be doing it also, or you feel that way also. And our view of stress and the way we eat and all of these things, like it's almost a rebellious act to take care of yourself. And now your situation is a little bit different. You actually got diagnosed with something, with an autoimmune disease. But I mean, but there's so many lessons to be taken away from your journey without, maybe getting diagnosed, but understanding the things that sort of led to that. Because people can have that same journey, the high achiever job, the stress, and then eventually getting sick and something happening. So before we get into, how you help people now, let's talk about maybe what you would have done if you understood this information now in that same job that you did have. Because some people listening are going to be in that high achiever job, and they're going to want to know, okay, I still like this job. I still want to be in this track, but what are some things that I might be able to do to take care of myself in the midst of all of this stuff?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I definitely have to say, I felt all of these things that you just described way before I got diagnosed or way before I started taking this seriously. Because like you said, so many people actually feel that way. And I think the more pressure you get from your job, the more you also feel like that, and the more your colleagues all feel like this. And you kind of write it off as just the stress from the job. This is kind of normal. It's also, I used to work project based. So some projects are worse than others. So you knew eventually this project was going to be over, and it felt like you would then be able to catch a break, which you then never got because it was another project. That's kind of how it just went on and on and on. And you would always push this problem out in the future. Like eventually I will get to it. Eventually I will be on holiday again, be able to relax a bit, able to unplug a bit. And then you went back and it was like immediately back to where you left, back to where you where you left off. You never actually catch that break. And it's also something that I mentioned before with anxiety levels, remembering how how anxious we used to be then. You're back in, your body remembers the stress and you're immediately triggered again. Maybe nothing has happened yet, but your body immediately remembers again where you left off. And it's a stress response that the body can learn. And it's very difficult to unlearn that again. And especially if you don't do something consciously about it, you don't take any conscious effort to unlearn the stress response. Even if you take out the stress, your body actually will not forget that it is stressed. And that's something that took me years and years to learn, like long after I was diagnosed, and even long into being a health coach, when I realized just taking away that stress isn't actually what makes the difference, but you have to teach your brain, you have to teach your body that you are safe, that this stress is kind of it's work stress. It's kind of man-made stress. It's not something that's life-threatening. And we can't differentiate anymore what the stress actually is. It's all the same to us. To our body, it all feels like this is actually about life and death. The stress is something that we have to take extremely serious, although sometimes we're just working to unrealistic deadlines that don't actually have any big impact if we miss them or not, if we fulfill them. To our body, this feels like our life depends on meeting that deadline. So it's kind of these conditions. First of all, we have to understand them, because otherwise there's no way we will take that seriously, because it's just stress. It comes with a job. Everybody feels the same way. And I think if I would go back and do it all again, I don't know if I would be able to do things differently, sadly, because I think you kind of need to step away from the stress first and see it for what it is, and develop this mentality that this is not a life and death situation. And many people don't really get that opportunity. And you really have to make that conscious effort to evaluate, why am I feeling like this? Is this justified? And once you register that, then you can do something about it. But I think the advice I would give people is really take a couple of days. If you feel like this, if you feel like you're extremely stressed, unreasonably stressed, take a couple of days maybe to step away and evaluate what this stress means for you, where this comes from, if this is a real stress, if this is kind of I don't know how to say it, but like a man-made kind of created stress that isn't actually a real stressor in the sense of a life and death situation. And that's something that we don't really do anymore. Even if I talk to my parents, maybe they have all this stress. They always have to be active, always do something. Like, I have this appointment, that appointment, this is happening at work, and so on. Like, they don't step out of this stress cycle. It's something that we just learn to live with, but our body doesn't forget that. And for our body, this is not good because it constantly feels threatened. And it constantly feels like there's a danger. We constantly have to run away from something, and it cannot catch this break. And without that break, we can't learn to understand what we're even running away from.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not very good at like turning on and turning off.
Yeah.
But coming from like a sports world, like athletes, the best athletes are really good at that. They fucking turn it on for the game, and then once the game is over and they take off their uniform, they can turn it off. And now they can be dads or moms, or they can go hang out with their friends, or they can turn off the game. But in our lives, we don't give ourselves a chance to do that. We don't get ourselves a chance to turn on and off. Like we're just on all day, all day, all day. And then we finally get into bed and our brain is still hyperactive. We're thinking about 75 different things because we haven't given ourselves a chance to turn off, to cool down, to think about our day, to like decompress. It's always on. And man, if you can, like, even throughout the day, like thinking about just like work, like your brain and your body are really good at 90 minutes. After 90 minutes, take a break, right? And then you're able to do that, boom, boom, boom. And then maybe after dinner, you have a nightly ritual where you can start to calm down and cool down and shut off a little bit instead of just being like, I'm always on. This is what I do all day, every day. And like, there's always a place for hard work. Like, just like, of course there is. Like, you're a health coach. You didn't just get clients by just like, sitting in your room, like pretending that people were just going to knock on your door. Like, it's not how it worked. You went out and did the thing. You got the clients, you're getting on podcasts, you're posting on content, you're reaching out to people, you're getting certifications, like you're doing all of this work. But there's also a place for relaxation, for recovery, for rest, for downtime. And I think we're starting to get there as a society where we're understanding that both of those things are as important. Rest and recovery and hard work are sort of equally important. But it's taken me a long time. I mean, I'm 31 years old and I'm finally understanding this. I did not understand it when I was actually playing the sport that I was playing because I just wanted to be the best that I could be. And I thought if I took any sort of rest that I was losing out on getting better, when really it probably would have made me better because I would have had more energy and things of that nature. So it's just an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think the fact that you said, athletes who are at the top of their game, they are able to differentiate that so much. They don't take that home. That is the biggest difference probably to the people that I used to work with, because we all took our work home. There was never a time where we would fully switched off, because you're not even allowed to do that, right? If you're not available, if something happens, if you're not picking up your phone, if you're not responding to an email, it's going to be a huge thing. Like, there's so much drama around that. There's no way for many people to do that at work in a capacity that gives them enough time to recover and to reset, to recharge their batteries. And that's a conversation that I had to have with people from my work, with my boss at the time, and explain that I'm no longer able to work like this because I need this rest. At the time, I had already had my diagnosis, so it felt like something that I could ask for. They understood the severity. They understood how much I needed that rest. For many people, though, if they don't have a diagnosis, they don't even know how to have that conversation, because it's just so weird. Like, you're asking for rest. What do you mean? It's not really, it's not budgeted for. Like, many companies don't really work like that. They don't understand this need for people who maybe, maybe they don't have a family, maybe don't have children. Like, what is your excuse? Why can't you work like this if everybody else can? And there's really a lot of shift that still needs to happen. But like you said, there's already shift that starts to happen. And that's really great, because that is what we really need as a society and as human beings, this balance between, like work and play, and being on and switching off, and working hard and then resting and giving ourselves time to recover and recharge.
Absolutely. It's amazing. So when you first got diagnosed, what was that like? What did you feel like? Did you feel like your life was, or your identity changed, or who you are as a person changed, or did it take you some bit of time to accept sort of your new body and your new life, or what was the case there?
I think for me, it was very overwhelming when it happened, because it kind of felt like I went to the doctor when it was the worst it could possibly be. Like, I waited until then, until I couldn't take it any longer. So when I got my diagnosis, which happened quite soon after, I was already so like broken at the time. Bless you. Now it's you
Excuse
who's
me.
sneezing.
Yeah.
It felt like I was already so broken at the time that for me it was a big difference. It was like from one day to another. That's how it felt to me. I got the diagnosis. I wasn't able to work anymore. It was a really clear break between the life that I used to have, and then suddenly now I'm sick. I can't get out of bed anymore many days. I can't really keep up with that work pace anymore. So there was a big element of like, who am I now? Like, what does this make me? What does this diagnosis change for me? And I think through all areas of life, like definitely work, of course, I couldn't really keep up with that anymore. But also I didn't want to keep up with that anymore, because I had now this diagnosis on black and white, what the stress, what my life conditions did to me and how they impacted my health. So I didn't want to work like that anymore. But also you have like your friends groups, who are all still in that mindset, and you are suddenly the one who changes, and you don't really fit in there anymore. They don't understand what you're talking about. You have a hard time talking to them like nothing is happening. So there's a bit of an identity crisis always also with that, because you have changed, they haven't, and you're questioning, like, am I doing the right thing? Are they doing the right thing? Am I the weird one, or are they just not getting it? So there's definitely a lot of soul searching that went on for me, and that I also I pour that into my programs when I'm working with clients, because I feel like that's a really big part of accepting your life with a chronic health condition, with an autoimmune disease, that I'm still surprised many people don't talk about. They treat it as a health issue, while at the same time it's really kind of a life issue. Like, it is an identity issue. It is an identity crisis that we're pushed into, where we're considering and questioning, like, why am I leading the life that I'm leading? Why am I having these priorities that maybe don't actually align with what's truly important in my life? Like, why am I dedicating so much time and effort into these things that are harmful to me, or are not helping me to get to where I really want to be? Or what is this place where I really want to go? Even like these questions were never in my head before. I never used to question what my life goals were, or where they came from. Like you asked earlier, like, were they actually my goals, or is it something that came from society? I never questioned that at the time. But having a diagnosis like that, it really provides you with the perfect opportunity to question all of these things, and to consider whether your priorities actually align with what is important in your life, if they align with your true values, your true beliefs about what life is supposed to be. And that's what it did for me. And that really helped me also decide I don't want to work in that job anymore. I do want to work with other people who are going through the same. I want to try and help them. I want to try and kind of share what I learned, so they can also benefit from it, and don't have to do it on their own.
Yeah. Yeah, to an extent, I guess it's somewhat easier to just always do what you're supposed to do. rather than, doing the really hard work to figure out who you are. I mean, your case and my case are similar. I didn't start to figure out who I really was until I went through the worst experience of my life. And then I had, there's no chance at that. There's no other option at that point. You either like go sink into this wallow of darkness, or you slowly pull yourself out of the trenches and figure out who you are and where you want your life to be. But if that sort of event never happens, like everyone goes through painful things, of course, and challenges and setbacks. But if you just always do what you're supposed to do, it's a little bit easier than maybe figuring out exactly who you are and going after that scary thing. Because if you don't do it, or quote unquote, you fail, then that's like embarrassing or something, or whatever the perception might be. Obviously, it's not. It's just like an amazing just to try anything in life. But I think a lot of people have that feeling like, oh, this just like being moderately unhappy is way better than going after something and not succeeding. But obviously that's not true. The pain of regret is way, way harsher than like quote unquote failing at something, whatever that even is. If you try, in my opinion, that's not failing at all. That's like so admirable and honorable that you should be applauded for that work. And you're obviously going to learn something along the way that's probably going to lead you to something that you do actually do for the rest of your life. So, but anyways, and so I think that's what people think. At least that's what I think about when I see people who are doing a job that they're not in love with, but they just do because, this is it. This is like what they're supposed to be doing. And again, it's not easy to be an entrepreneur or start your own job or find something that you do love or work for something or something like, but there's options to take in terms of living the best life you can possibly live and not taking on this small level of unhappiness to stay in the comfort of what you're living in. But I do think that pain is the number one motivator for change. So if you do go through a painful moment or a series of painful moments, it's going to move you in that direction that you're supposed to be in anyways. You just had to get punched in the face for you to realize it. At least that was my case.
That was definitely the case for me too. So everything that you just said, 100% is what I lived through. And in hindsight, I'm glad that it happened the way it did, because I don't think I would have made that change otherwise. It really had to get as bad as it did for me to realize that I have to change something. And I felt like you mentioned that fear of failing before. I felt at the time that I had already failed. Like this life that I wanted for myself, the track that I was on, I had already failed because I couldn't keep up with that anymore. So I had to jump that ship somehow and just get out at the time. So I quit before I knew that I wanted to become a coach, before I had any kind of plan. I just quit to get out and just recover and give myself some time to heal. And the interesting response that I got from my colleagues at the time was that they didn't judge me for that, which is what I expected. I thought they would be like, oh, like, how come you did this? Like, are you crazy? That's not how they reacted at all. They all thought it was brave, and they all thought that was a great idea and that I was brave enough to try this new thing or like try to do nothing for a while. And I thought, it's not brave. Like, this is the only option I have here. I have like, I'm with my back to the wall, right? I have no other options. For me, it didn't feel brave at the time, but the perception of that other people had really surprised me there, because that really showed me so many more people are in a similar situation, maybe not as bad, but not bad enough for them to take that step, for them to take that leap and leave and try out something else and try out something that maybe fits better to their idea of what a good life looks like. But for me, it had to get as bad as it did that I was brave enough to take that step. And I wish it wouldn't have been like that. And I wish that it wouldn't be like this for other people. But sadly, that is often the reality, that this pain that you said has to reach a certain threshold. So we feel like finally we have to do something. And I see that time and time again, that the pain really motivates people to change because they don't want things to get worse. But I also noticed that the pain often only gets you so far. It doesn't get you all the way. It's like something that jumpstarts this reaction. You are suddenly in a reactive mode. You are kind of pushed into action to preventing worse things to happen. But if that is the only thing that motivates you, you're also not going to get super far most of the time.
Mm.
Eventually, you're going to crash. Eventually, this is not going to work. Eventually, you feel like you did really fail because things might not have gotten better. You might not be able to prevent the worst. It kind of feels this whole fear-based process is really stressful for the body. And it really, it's a lot of pressure also that we put on ourselves. So when we're not able to change this fear into a love-based approach where we can use that to create a hopeful vision for us. We can use that to fuel optimism, and we can use that to fuel this like a vision that we have for our life, something to work towards instead of running away from something. I feel that is usually when people start seeing the best results, and that is when they are having fun with changing their lives, and it's an enjoyable process, and it's not a painful experience anymore. And that also signals the body then that they are on the right track and that they are safe and there's no danger, no threat to run away anymore. And this whole stress response can also calm down because the whole process just feels so much more enjoyable.
Yeah. Yeah, pain is great to get you off your ass.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not a long-term solution like you're saying. Like um most of the best athletes that I know are always running away from something. They're running
Mm-hmm.
away from, being that little kid or, not making the team or whatever. But then you get to a certain point, like you're saying, and you have to change it because there's no sustainability, there's no durability at that point. You have to then switch to an intrinsic motivation of why am I doing this? Well, this
Yeah.
makes me feel better. My life is improved. My relationships are better. I feel much more joy when I wake up in the morning. Like all of these sorts of things can be different motivators intrinsically than like, the pain or running away from something. Um, but I mean, yeah, I mean, so that happens over a long term, and I'm sure that's what you
Mm-hmm.
help your clients with, because I imagine people who get diagnosed with an autoimmune disease like want to identify solely with that disease, and I imagine that becoming who you are um, is probably just as detrimental as, I work in the mental health field, and like people identify with their depression. I am depression. Like you may experience depression sometimes, but that's not who you are as a person. There's much more to you than that, and I imagine it might be the same with an autoimmune disease.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what often also fuels that is when people are looking for community, someone who goes through something similarly, there's different kinds of communities, and some are very uplifting, and some are giving you hope, and they're fueling this positive outlook, and others are also really detrimental to the track that we're currently on. When there's people there that experience similar things, that share only the bad sides of the story,
Mm.
and you're being pulled in more and more, and life is worse and worse, and everybody else who's also going through the same thing has this terrible outlook on life, and it's all doom and gloom in there. And someone told me the term pity party, when there's people in a community who always pity each other, and you feel like you're pitying yourself and life is so terrible. And to get out of that is really, really difficult. And I feel like that is often what I see with different groups on social media. They can be very uplifting, but they can also be really, really detrimental to our health and to this track we're currently on. And finding a group of people who are like-minded, but also positive and can help you move forward instead of pulling you back and pulling you back into this pity party, that is really a big part of finding out your way and finding a way that also works long term and that brings you forward. Because yeah, like we have this identity crisis, and we are starting to define ourselves over our our condition. Like we can't eat the same things as other people anymore. We can't do the same things as other people anymore. Our friends don't always understand us. Our families don't always understand us. So there's very much a lot of evidence for why we are a different person suddenly, for why we are our disease, if you want. But that's also why I feel like such a big part of learning to live with a chronic condition well is to define who you are at your core, like who you are below this the surface of a chronic health condition, of an autoimmune disease. What are your true values? What are your true beliefs? What goals do you have for your life? Because those are usually not related to disease. Those are like much deeper, and they have been there before. Maybe you haven't listened to them, or they have changed over time. They might have changed with your diagnosis. They might have changed with all the things that happened to you. Suddenly, these values and these beliefs are a bit different than they used to be before, because you have a different perspective now and a different outlook. But if we don't dig and find them out, often people will just live without ever knowing their true values and their true beliefs and their true goals in life. And that is something that really holds you back, because you don't get this long-term outlook of where do I actually want to go. And all the effort we can put into getting better kind of going to be half-hearted, because we don't have anything that drives us and that motivates us to really stick with that and work for something.
Yeah. Yeah, I think people would miss that, right? Thinking like you're just a health coach, so
Yeah.
why would you be thinking about values? Why would that matter? And it matters so much, because it's like it's the map that moves us in the direction we want to go. And especially if we get diagnosed or hit with anything that's like severe or now becomes part of our being, we don't want to be solely driven by that. Yeah, I have to make more conscious choices because I have this thing. Like, of course. So I am somewhat driven by it, because I can't do certain things or eat certain things because I have what's going on in my body, and I have to honor that. But I also don't want to limit the way my life can be. It can still be amazing and great and fulfilled and joyous, but I have to move through certain values that mean the most to me. And having a coach with you do that is like, I mean, I think it's the most invaluable thing possible, because you have a sounding board. You have someone who's like moved through the exact same space as you just a couple years prior. So they're not too far removed where they don't see you in your struggle. I mean, so cool. So talk to me about how, when someone comes to you, how you're thinking about how they should figure out what their most important values are.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think most of the time when people approach me, it's something that is very far from their mind. Usually they come in and they say, I want to talk about diet. I want to talk about what I should and shouldn't eat, and how I'm, what kind of lifestyle changes I'm supposed to do. And I always say, like, let's take a step back. Like, why? I'm not going to jump into diet right now. First, I want to know why you're here, why you even want to get better, like what your driver is. And then people are starting to think like, oh, I don't know, like I don't want to experience my symptoms anymore, or I want to take my medication anymore, or I want to feel worse. I'm scared that I'm going to feel worse. But then when you start to dig a little bit deeper, like, why is this important to you? Why are your symptoms bothering you? Like, what are they holding you back from doing? Then people are really struggling, because often they haven't thought that far. They haven't thought about how their life would be fundamentally different if they didn't have all of these health struggles, because kind of like the field of vision ends with the disease, and you don't think about what is beyond that anymore. So for some people, for example, I had a client and she had a lot of back pain, and of course that was very uncomfortable for her, and she wanted to feel better, have more energy. So that was like her primary driver. Like, I want to change my diet so I can have less symptoms and feel better in my body. But then when we decided to look beyond that, why was that important to her? Why was having this energy important to her, and like not having back pain? then we started to discover that, she has a young son. She wants to be able to play with the son. She wants to see the son growing up and be there for him and not have to be in her room and sleep because she's exhausted, but like spend her life watching him live his life and be a part of that. And that is something that is very much tied to her values, her beliefs in life, and to her vision of this best life she could live this life with her son and be really there for him. And that is how her disease limited her. And once we had established that, the question wasn't so much related to what can she eat and what can't she eat, but what can she do in her life currently to be closer to this vision. And diet turned out to be one of the last things that she wanted to do, actually, but really working towards establishing that vision a bit more, like getting clearer on how is she currently holding herself back from living this vision? How is she currently holding herself back from experiencing these things that she wants to experience? Because, of course, disease is an issue. Like, our symptoms can have an impact on these things, but it's not something that stops you. What stops you is focusing on doing all of the things that you have to do to feel better, and then you can finally live out your purpose and live out your vision of a better life. And we're kind of putting up this wall that says, once we have crossed this wall, once we have like no longer any health issues, then we can do all the things that are fun for us. But this is kind of that's not how life works often, right? And that's something that can close us off from being more in touch with all the things that are really important to us. So that's something we establish first, this vision of where they want to go. And then I have a kind of a 3-step process that I work through with them. So the first we're actually looking at is your mindset, and that is what I also just mentioned, like kind of what's your approach to managing your disease? What's your approach to healing? Are you optimistic about that? Are you scared about that? Are you coming in from a place of love or from a place of fear? And if it's fear, how can we change that into something that is love-based? How do you talk to yourself? Like if you look in the mirror and you're speaking to yourself, what kind of voice are you using? Like, are you very critical with yourself? And that is something that people with autoimmune diseases often tend to do. They are usually very self-critical people. They are actually very perfectionist people. They have a very mean inner voice. And that is a difficult starting point to be in. So if we don't change that inner voice to one that is more supportive, that's going to hold you back the whole time. Because if you're then in a place where you want to change your diet, that inner voice is always going to be like, this is not good enough. You ate the wrong things. Like, you didn't put enough effort in. You're not in a place where your body ever feels safe, because this inner voice, inner critic, is constantly threatening you. It's constantly bullying you. So that's something we manage first. And then when you're in a place where you say, okay, I am coming in with love for myself. I want to do all of these good things for myself. I want to make my body feel safe. I want to prioritize my body. I want to prioritize, for her, that was this love for her son, and indulge in this love for her son, do fun things with him, have all these positive experiences in life. Then we can tackle bigger things, where I call them more bodily things, like changing your diet, like looking at your sleep schedule, like how restorative is your sleep, how much exercise do you get, how much movement do you get? Is there something that we should look at and change? And then aligning all these different lifestyle factors to fit your healing path, so you get the most out of that. And that's usually what people come for, but then they get that only after we talked about mindset. We talked about that first big step. And then the last step, that's when I talk to them about their self, if you want, or their soul, their spirit. And then we establish all of these big, important values for them. So we can kind of tie that back into, in the beginning, we established their vision, but now it's really, how fundamental is this vision reflected in your life? What are these building blocks in your life that you build this vision on? What are your core values? Have they changed? Who are the people in your life? Are they supportive? Are they not so supportive? Because we define ourselves a lot about our relationships, about other people. We also define ourselves a lot about our achievements. Where do we get recognition from? What are these areas in our lives where we get where we are engaged? And that could be engaged in fun activities. It could be engaged in areas of achievement, like sports, for example. For many people, sports is like a field where they also define themselves because they get this achievement. They have these milestones they can work towards. But is that something that is important to use your core? Are you really defined by that? Or is it something that you use because you were craving this achievement? What other areas in life are there where you could get that achievement that are more aligned with your values, for example? And then how do you take all of this, what we have learned, and put that into your life? Like, how can your aligned life look if you're looking at all these things that we talked about? Where is there misalignment in your life? Are your visions or your values aligned with your job currently? Is there something that is holding you back from living out these values? Is there anything, where you have misalignment? And that could be in all areas of life again, in your relationships, in work life, in your personal life. That is the main work. And how do we create this, your best life really, with a health condition, with an autoimmune disease? And it's so much bigger than simply thinking about what do we eat, what do we don't eat, because it's really a way of life. And it's an opportunity that we have that many people don't have, who never went through a crisis like this, to reevaluate how are we living our life, and is this how we want to live it?
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you. Where should people go if they want more of you?
I have a website, so it's xeniabrandstetter.com. I'm sorry for the name, but I'm sure we can copy it somewhere in the show notes. But there absolutely. They'll find all the information about how they can work with me. I'm currently offering a free one-off coaching session. So for 1 hour, they're going to get a teaser on how a coaching session with me look like. If they have any questions, any specific questions, how what I just talked about would apply to their lives, to their situation, we can talk about that in detail. And I would be excited if they book that and we can talk about it together.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Thank you for your time, your energy, and the work you put out into the world. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much for tuning into that episode. And if you enjoyed it, click right here for another full-length episode of the podcast. And please don't forget to subscribe. But most importantly, above all else, please take good care of yourselves and others. And I'll see you next time. Lots of love. Cheers.